We negotiated through being laid off and finished right when the ULP was resolved, so everyone got their jobs back and a new contract. We saved roughly 40 jobs.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Back in the end of January, Twitter account at Union Elections, username Daily Union Elections. They're an account that it's pretty self-explanatory, right? They put out some information about union elections because they have it every day. And so like, oh, hey, here's this union election that just came out, and he'll like screenshot NLRB filings. It's pretty cool account. And he also engages sometimes in discourse. And this time he created some discourse when he tweeted out, "Union folks, what is the best grievance / ULP that you have ever won?" So we picked out about 5 or 6 really cool ones, and but we're gonna start off with Adam, some testimonies from Adam, because you've got some pretty cool ones, right?
Yeah, I certainly had a lot of grievances, and did not really deal with ULPs much, at least in my day job. They were relevant to my staff union position, but thinking about some successful grievances and settlements, I spent over 5 years representing workers in Huntsville City Schools, and I think when I added it all up, I was able to put over $250,000 back into the pockets of our members. You know, that's not insignificant. That's just the pay-related cases. Yeah, obviously, there were, grievances that weren't involving pay. That I had a string of several non-certified support employees who were working in operations who had been misclassified, and they had been just strung along for years with promises of being regraded and given raises. It took a mountain of documentation, threats of lawyers, and months of persistence, but we won some of those cases, and those members received significant pay increases. And so that makes up a fair chunk of that total amount. But the biggest single win in terms of dollar amount, is also possibly my favorite win. It was several years back. I don't know the exact year, but it was a year where the state legislature passed a 4% pay raise across the board for public school employees, when at the same time, PHIP raised their health insurance cost. It's funny how that always seems to happen hand in hand. Well, we had this long-time educator here in Huntsville. He had well over 30 years of service. Shout out to Bill, if you're listening. And this is the type of guy who always reads the fine print. He is that guy. He inspected his check stubs very closely, looking for that 4% raise. And he started doing the math and realized he didn't get the full 4%. See, Huntsville City Schools used to pay above the state minimum for certified educators. But then you had the state intervention and Wardynski experiment in the early 2010s, during which time the district reverted to paying the state minimum salary matrix for new hires. So you had 2 different pay scales, essentially. You had the veteran teachers who were grandfathered in above state minimum, and all the new folks coming in at the state minimum. So when the state pay raise came around, Huntsville City Schools gave everyone a raise based off of 4% adjustment to the state minimum, not the actual salaries that people were making, which of course was the intent. So that meant hundreds of veteran teachers, the teachers who had actually stuck around through all the madness and some of the highest turnover in the state, were in effect penalized by receiving a pay increase of less than 4% of their salary. And that decision took place in a budget approved and implemented before Dr. Matt Aiken became superintendent. He was only there for a brief time, but during his tenure, I was able to make the case to him about this pay raise injustice, and he agreed to have his CFO settle the issue. Hundreds of teachers received a back pay check, as well as the adjustment to their monthly salary going forward. And I do give a lot of credit to that teacher, Bill, who was not only careful enough to analyze his pay stub, but was persistent in bringing it to my attention as his rep, to the district's attention, and working with me as his rep to keep the issue alive. And I will give credit to the Huntsville City Schools and superintendent and CFO at the time, Matt Aiken and Bob Haygood, for doing the right thing. Unfortunately, that's not as common as it should be. And it was nice to have an administration that would actually respond to the evidence and take appropriate action without having to be shamed in the media or threatened with litigation, even if, sure, we had to stay on them for a pretty long while. It was a win-win, right? The employees were made whole. The district avoided bad PR and legal costs by working with me to settle this. And instead of legal costs and bad PR, the new administration made a positive impression on their most seasoned teachers. So for me, it's a good reminder that honestly, there's a lot of opportunities for win-wins like that. If management is willing to operate in good faith. And when management operates in good faith and is responsive to the employees and their representatives, they might just find they can prevent and quickly remedy issues in the workplace before they even become a grievance, ULP, or lawsuit. So that's my little grievance story.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, you know, the idea, there's certainly an inherent conflict between employees and bosses, right? Like
which we are very clear about, and I know that's often not so clear
from some places, even some unions, right?
Right, absolutely.
But there are, like you said, there are lots of instances where really the conflict is manufactured by the boss, and it doesn't have to be there. You know, there are genuinely so many fights that if the bosses just gave workers what they were asking for, it would actually be good for both parties. You know, maybe there are some, or there are some certainly that's not the case. There are certainly some cases where, you know, workers will win at the expense of bosses, or bosses will win at the expense of workers. But there are some instances like the one that you just laid out where workers winning is good for, you know, the organization and the employers as
right.
well.
I mean, they made a mistake. I personally believe it was an intentional mistake by the person responsible at the time. But whether it was intentional or not, it was a mistake, and they owned up to it and they fixed it. And it's amazing how much easier that went than if they had just played hardball with me and forced me to get ugly in that fight and bring other people involved, or, you know, get the media or lawyers involved. It would have ultimately cost them more to go the adversarial route.
Yeah. And
at least they had enough sense to do the math and figure that out. But as you said, oftentimes that's just not the case.
Yeah. Adam is not the only guy with a good grievance ULP story that is affiliated with the Valley Labor Report. David replied to the Union Elections account, and he recounted a story where 7 employees were laid off against the collective bargaining agreement for 6 months, and he got them recalled with back pay and all benefits made whole. Can't remember the exact number, but roughly $750,000. Good day for the home team. And indeed, $750,000 for 7 employees.
That's great.
That's fantastic. That's really great. And I didn't include these in the graphic requests to Joe, but David ended up fighting with this guy in his replies who was saying that, oh, this is actually bad for the employees. Like, what, you know, whatever. Well, you know, they shouldn't have asked for that much, $750,000 for doing nothing. And it's like, the employer shouldn't have broken the contract. Like, the idea, I mean, this was presumably just a working person that is so, you know, brain rotted that he's in this situation where the employer was wrong, clearly, paid $750,000 because they were wrong, and this guy is somehow saying, oh, no, the employees shouldn't have asked for that. Like, the idea,
that's pretty pitiful.
It was wild. Jamie somebody that I don't know, but had a very good story, said the grievance in itself isn't anything impressive, but when we were just organized, the first time I got called in as a steward, they handed me the employee's write-up and stated they intended to suspend him for 1 day. I read it, looked up, and just said no, and they accepted. So that's great. We love easy wins like that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, if only they all worked that way, right?
Dave Camper, somebody that we haven't had on the show, but who has who's been a supporter of the program, and
Absolutely,
we appreciate that. And I've had good conversation with him on Twitter. He said, "I got a probationary employee, as in no contractual right to just cause, reinstated with full back pay by demonstrating disability discrimination. Didn't even have to take it to arbitration. Kicked their ass in the grievance meeting, and they called the next day to settle." Great job, Dave. We love to hear stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's also why we do talk about EEOCs and understanding your rights under Title VII and that kind of thing, because sometimes it's a factor, even if you don't even think it's a factor.
Right.
And so it's important to know your rights there.
Yeah, absolutely. Michael Murphy said, company policy prohibited union t-shirts. An employee quit instead of taking off his t-shirt. I was able to get a $20,000 in back pay award for Hobson's Choice constructive discharge. Do you know what Hobson's Choice means?
No.
I think that was, I probably should have looked that up, but it sounds like that's some kind of terminology, but that's pretty cool. Getting $20,000 in back pay for a constructive discharge for somebody that quit. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Constructive discharge is a hell of a practice that is very, very prevalent.
Yeah. The next one is from Patrick Shepard. He is, I think he's currently the Southern organizer for DSA, something like that. He said, supervisor distributed offer letters and then tried to rescind them. I got 25 people paid for 6 months of a job that they didn't do.
Sweet.
Love to see it. Love to see it.
Bet your supervisor thought hard next time.
Yeah. Doki Chamato said, we were organizing right before COVID. COVID hit. They laid us off. We filed a ULP, won, come back with employer-paid health care, 22% wage increases, and a path to full-time for part-timers. Our CFO and HR manager quit because the L was too heavy for them to carry around every day. The ULP said that they were using this as an excuse not to bargain, even though the staff had voted for the union. We negotiated through being laid off and finished right when the ULP was resolved. So everyone got their jobs back and a new contract. We saved roughly 40 jobs. That is
yeah.
Fantastic. Love to see it. Love to see the union W's. Big dubs up on the screen. You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.